Oh boy.
Yes. The 10-hour city council meeting 2 weeks ago.
I listened to probably about a third of it. I had plans that night that I couldn't listen to the whole thing. I was teaching a class, but
I didn't listen because I was trying to edit audio at the time, but I was reading the live tweets from all the media people.
Yeah.
Specifically Paul Duchesne. Because he's
mandatory
awesome.
bi-weekly shout out. It's all good. I like Paul.
Yeah. And I was on Twitter for 10 hours reading tweets about this bloody thing. And it was awful. Like some of the people who came were just spouting misinformation. Correct. And just there to make hateful, just to spread bigotry through the form of concern trolling.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there were people on city council who I think eventually got shamed into voting for the ban. And you could tell by their questions that they were hoping to have an excuse not to.
Yep.
And some of their questioning was incredibly offensive.
Oh, geez, was it ever bad?
Yeah. But the other part that I was frustrated with is even those who were in favor of the ban kind of got outclassed by the bigots they were questioning. There's that the stereotypical rule of lawyers. You always hear the cliche, don't ask a question you don't know the answer to. Mm-hmm. There were a number of times that the city councilors would ask a question and they were just thrown off by the answer because the bigots have gotten really good at how to frame their bigotry as the opposite, right? So they're not anti-trans or homophobic. They're fighting for trans rights in their mind, right? They're fighting for gay rights because they're fighting for the right for gay people to have this type of therapy.
Which is, I mean, not to get too far into the debunking of it, but it's just pure lies and bullshit. Like,
it's absolutely lies and bullshit. But it's when you have a city councilor say, "Have you?" Because she was trying to prove bias, and because I was the audio stream on YouTube didn't have who was speaking, so I was going by listening, and because I wasn't consistent the whole time, I didn't know which counselor it was. But she was obviously one of the counselors in favor of the bill, and was asking questions. And she actually said, "No, when Masters called her out, like, why are you asking these questions?" Like, she said, "I'm trying to ask questions to prove bias or to show bias." Mm-hmm. But she asked, "Have you ever?" So you claim to be a lawyer who fights for human rights. Yes. Have you ever fought for the human rights of LGBT people? Oh, yes. And she's like, "Oh, what? You have?" Yes, absolutely. I've done so a number of times. Have you ever represented groups who are homophobic? Nope. I have never represented a group that was homophobic. Like
those, the questions revealed a level of ignorance on the strategies that are used by those against the LGBT community.
Because we are so used to mustache twirling villains from our media.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
Ha ha ha, I will get those gay people, is sort of what they envision the homophobes and the bigots to be. And we see the same thing in racial issues and gender issues, right? Like, and there are some, don't get me wrong. You'll see every now and then some troll come out of YouTube and be like, "I hate those," and then use the F slur. But that's not the ones who go to these meetings. They have gotten polished, and they should have learned from a year ago at the school trustees meeting, because the bigots put on a clinic on how to hide your bigotry. Right. And I wish I could remember the name of the former head of the school board. I'm guessing you're looking it up as I speak. I can see you typing, which is perfect. Thank you. But it then came out that she had this video where she was presenting to her church on how to fight against the gender and sexually diverse community without it seeming like you are. And she talked about, you bring up points of process, and you don't talk about your opposition. You say that obviously you support this, but what you talk about is rights for all people.
Was it Catherine Gagne?
It sure was. Thank you, Catherine Gagne. So Catherine Gagne basically had this video of her teaching her church how to hide your bigotry. And she was very blatant in this video. It was one of those that was leaked.
Right.
But it was a clinic on how to hide your bigotry. And she was like open and honest about it. Say like, yes, like we hate the gay, like we hate homosexuality, but we can't come out and say that. So we have to hide how we present our faith. Right. And she was like super honest in that private meeting on how, yes, they're bigots and yes, they hate homosexuality. But here's how you have to hide it. And then
there was
at that meeting did every single technique she talked about.
Right. Yeah. There was even, some people were apparently at a course before this meeting to learn about dog whistles, not in the way to use them, but in supposedly the way to understand them.
No.
But then when they went and they did this stuff, like the city council was supposed to be looking and learning from this, and they didn't learn a damn thing. Like they fell for every trap that was put in front of them.
Yeah. And like, maybe like, obviously some of them didn't, or they didn't in the end because most of them voted,
well, yeah, no, that's true.
Like,
yeah.
So they voted the right way in the end. There were a couple that still voted against the one element, even after it was watered down, because they watered down the support for Bill C-6 by removing any reference to Bill C-6 in order to get the unanimous compromise.
Yeah.
And then they still didn't get it, which again is a classic dirty trick, right? You try and you water down your opponent's argument to try and get a compromise, and then you still vote against the compromise. Anyway.
They did vote unanimously in favor of getting a bill brought in front of city council by July, I think it is. And
they bumped up the timeline on it, which is good.
Yeah.
I'm my only worry on the bumping up the timeline is
it's going to be too fast. It's too fast.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah. Is they're going to then use the bumping up the timeline that they themselves voted for as a way of trying
There's not enough
justify.
Consultation. There's too fast.
That said, they don't, like, the bigots don't have the votes on our city council.
No, that's
right.
That seems true.
It's, Trina Shaw, and a couple of the others,
John Findura and Bresciani.
Those three are largely just on an island of their own, fighting against the fairly progressive remainder of the council. The remainder of the council just didn't bring their A game because they didn't know how well organized their opposition is. They got outclassed in the debate, quote unquote. If you're treating it like a game as opposed to a fight for basic rights, they lost. Luckily, they didn't change. Like, they continued to vote the right way. But yeah, one of the points that I really like is, I believe it was Stevens, and I could be wrong. But I believe it was Stevens who afterwards talked about how he was really happy about the end result. He apologized for the discourse that occurred during the meeting, and then said it is unfortunate that there aren't people from the community on the city council itself. And I think that was a good acknowledging of the fact that, underrepresented communities are underrepresented.
Go figure.
We had I seriously had that. Okay, do I is this the motivation? Because I'm in Bresciani's district. Okay. So if I choose to run in 2-3 years, that's who I'd be running against.
Yeah.
I've said a number of times, I don't think Regina is ready for a atheist, queer, polyamorous city councilor or politician of any stripe, but
if you were in my area, I would obviously vote for you.
Thank you. I think there's there's someone else I know who is talking about running now as well. So
okay.
I think you may see Findora Brasciani and Shaw all face some opposition. My only hope is it doesn't get split.
I announced after the meeting on the Saskatchewan, on our Twitter, From Many People's Strength Twitter, if anybody wants a campaign volunteer to go against some of these councillors, I will help campaign. Like, this is, if there's one place that I can help out, it's that we can help get rid of we can help make a progressive city.
And I have, like, one of the things I talk about where we talk about strategic voting and compromise and all of those things, and how you're not going to get a far leftist prime minister. Like, we are not going to get a communist or socialist prime minister anytime soon. Maybe someday, right? Like,
no.
But where you can start influence, and again, I talk about the Tea Party movement in the States being the template that the left needs to use, and not obviously their policies, but this idea that the Tea Party didn't start with Donald Trump.
Right.
The Tea Party started with comptrollers and dog catchers and city councilors. The Tea Party started with, how can we get people, and in Canada we don't elect the same level of things that they elect in the US. Like, we don't elect our dog catchers here.
But our city councilors,
and like
school boards.
Yeah. So we can look at getting people who are progressive and far more progressive than you're going to see on a national stage elected into office. Yeah. In these smaller offices, and then you build from that, right? You use that as your platform to build on. So,
I mean, it's not Saskatchewan related, but for people who are watching these kinds of movements on the right a little bit, keep your eye out for QAnon city councilors and like some hardcore. Like, there's tons of them getting elected right now, and they're affecting school board decisions, and they're affecting city decisions all over the place in COVID denial and all kinds of things. And
we are, in a lot of ways, affected by our local governments far more than we're affected by federal governments.
Yeah.
Right? Like, local governance has a huge, huge impact on our daily lives. We talked about this on our show, literally on our very first episode, because when we started this podcast, it was in the lead up to the U.S. federal election, the Saskatchewan provincial election, and the local elections in Saskatchewan. And I said time and time again in those lead up podcasts, it's the local ones that get the least coverage and are probably the most important. And we're seeing it in things like this. So
yeah, that's right. Okay, so the only other thing regarding this this meeting was there's calls for change in the way that we do city council meetings. There was so many out of city delegates.
Yeah.
And I asked the question on Twitter to one of the media representatives, why are there so many out of city delegates? And apparently anybody from Canada, all of Canada, could submit to be a delegate in this city council meeting as long as they did it 40 hours in advance. And with the organization that comes from these anti-LGBTQ organizations, of course they were 48 hours in advance. They knew this was coming, and they knew they had to be involved, and they had people from all over the country speaking against this ban.
And I have to apologize. It was I credited Stevens, who did a lot of great things in the meeting. He was the one who bumped the timetable up by the year. It was Dan LeBlanc who gave the apology. It's in the story about the changing the process. And when he said, "I'm sorry that you're not part of the city council that's deciding fundamental rights about you."
He's the province's least favorite Regina City councilor
right
now. But he is currently one of my favorites.
All right. Fair. So it's his apology, and he's an apology that these are the sort of indignities that you have to suffer without you here. Yeah, I think in an issue where it's for and against, you limit it to a certain number of people advocating on each side. If it's a yes or no vote, you can have up to 4 people from outside the city on one side, up to 4 people from outside the city on the other, or pick a number.
That's right.
Because what happened in this one is many of organizations who were in support of the ban kind of had a unified voice behind a small number of speakers. So there were only 3 or 4 speakers in support of the ban. A little more than that, but Queen City Pride I don't think didn't submit a speaker. We listened. Because it wasn't our place. There were people who were better educated. There were people who could advocate in better ways. And that's not that fell outside of our mandate. Maybe it shouldn't. But but when you have 25 out of 30 people arguing against the ban and 5 arguing for, it makes it seem like
And that's something that like you say, Queen City Pride has this standard. They felt they didn't have the right experts. They didn't have the breadth of knowledge or need, or they didn't have the standing to have a delegate. But that doesn't stop the other side, right? They have every single person. There was a person with no relation to the city, no credentials, he wasn't a lawyer, he wasn't a doctor, he wasn't an LGBT person. He was just some bigot who wanted to have a voice on the city council.
Yep.
And he sits there and he gets to have a voice. And it's just, humility doesn't favor us in any way on the progressive side. We're the ones who have it, but it's not good for our side to have it.
But anyways, I think in general that needs to be addressed. And obviously not all issues are this controversial. Right. This shouldn't be controversial either, but
no. We have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 articles related to COVID in Saskatchewan. Most of them are all stemming from this initial thing where anti-mask protesters are emboldened by the lack of response from authorities. If you don't show them that there are consequences for their actions, then they will continue them and grow stronger. We see this all over the place. The crackdown, there has been no crackdown. They crack down on the wrong protests all the time. So there has been some tickets and fines issued since this initial article that will be in the show notes came out. We had a Sask Health Authority officer, or an inspector, who shook hands with the anti-lockdown, anti-mask protesters. There was a policeman who attended a anti-lockdown rally in Saskatoon, who now had to resign. And now we're seeing there were 11 ticketed in Saskatoon because of the Children's Freedom Rally. And then there was police issued just this last weekend 16 tickets in relation to the Regina Freedom Rally. And then now the province is looking at increasing the maximum fine for breaking health orders. And the last one is that there's a Saskatoon church who's facing $14,000 in fines for ignoring for exceeding the number of people allowed to attend a worship service. And they said that they're not paying it, and that they posted some sign about police or have no authority in our walls or some damn thing. It's wait a minute. Isn't this aren't you the law and order people? It just blows me away. But
again, I folks underestimate the coercive power of the state.
That's right.
You think $14,000 fine is bad? Oh, you're just not going to pay it? Okay, you've lost your charitable tax donation status. So now donations to your church aren't tax deductible anymore. Boom.
Yeah, they could do that.
That should be you don't pay the fine. That's the next step. All of your parishioners, lose their tax deduction status for donating to you. Like, don't get me wrong. I don't think churches, I think churches should have to prove their actual charitable nature rather than automatically being considered charities. In Canada, we have a number of criteria for which something has to meet in order for it to be considered a charity. Be a church is one of the things. Like any non-religious organization has to prove they actually do good in the world, support the homeless, support the needy. There's a variety of benchmarks to hit. Be a church is one of them.
Yep.
But like, I think that would probably cost them more than $14,000. I could be wrong. Maybe it will rally their parishioners to support them even more without getting their tax deduction. But
yep.
I'm guessing the church gets more than $14,000 in donations per year from their parishioners.
I would guess
the collection plate probably has, has enough in it that would cost them more than $14,000 because of their parishioners losing out on the tax benefits. It's
a lot of this
stuff. I don't think that'll happen, right?
That's right.
The governments are going to pussyfoot around and say, "Oh, please," and if you don't, we'll ask you please again.
Yeah, that's right.
So
this increase in the fines for breaking the public health order, any individual caught breaking the health order will now face a fine of up to $7,500 with a 40% surcharge totaling $10,500. Yeah. And any organization that breaks the health order can be fined $100,000 plus a 40% surcharge.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm not a big pro police guy.
No, and I wish that this was not necessary. I wish people could just accept reality and like be responsible, but apparently we're not there.
Yeah, and I'm facing it in personal life, right? I have an ex-spouse who violated a bunch of orders. I didn't call the cops on her, but it meant I got exposed, and so did my kids. Now both my kids and I came back testing negative, thank God. But my ex ended up in the hospital, was again burden on the healthcare system, purely because of her own choices to violate health orders. Like that, again, it was a flat out choice on her part. She knew she was doing it while she was doing it, while still posting support. Like she's the opposite of the church because she's like, oh no, these are really great. I hate the anti-maskers. I hate people who are violating health orders. Right. It's important to follow, and we all need to work together to support this, and we need to socially distance. Like saying all the right things publicly, and then but I still need to go spend time with my girlfriend, and I need to go spend time with my mom, and I need to go spend time with my sister, and I need to go spend time with my brother, and I need to go spend time with my friend, and all of this is indoors and like.
And I don't know, it sure seems to me like the entire city of Regina has no idea we're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like they all just decided it was over. So
it was funny because we were exposed, because she started having symptoms on a Friday, and she left on the Friday afternoon. So that meant she was probably contagious for her last 2 days staying here. My kids and I were so we got put on lockdown, and we were you get phone calls from the health officials, and they're talking about something like, my lifestyle does not change very much. Right? Right. What's different? Okay, well, I still do the vast majority of my grocery shopping online. Normally, once every 2 weeks, I'll do a top-up trip to a physical in-person grocery store. I guess I won't do that this time.
Right.
And I had dropped off my vacuum for repairs at a vacuum repair shop. I needed that picked up. Right. And I'm like, fuck it, I'm spoiling myself. And you were kind enough to get me a couple bottles of liquor.
The funny thing about that was, I happened to walk in the store right after somebody else who was also looking for the exact same thing. And I was like, does David have two people buying it?
No, pure coincidence. That's funny. But I haven't been in a liquor store since the start of COVID. The last time I went to a liquor store was February of 2020.
Wow.
I have a fairly well stocked cold storage, and this is like, you know what? I want to spoil myself with something specific. If you're willing to get this for me, I'd appreciate it. But like this, but I'm talking to the health officials. Like, yeah, that is not really affecting my life at all. And then when we got let out of lockdown or isolation, they called again and like, you know, your tests have your tests come back negative because there's a lot of firewalls. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing for privacy reasons.
Right.
And like, yeah, no, we've been tested twice. Both came back negative. Haven't had any further contact. Remained isolated. So, okay, you're off isolation. I'm like, well, that will change absolutely nothing of how we do stuff. The only change was the only time I've left the house since coming off lockdown was my kids, because of all of the stress of what they're dealing with, chose to stay home for an extra week of at-home learning rather than returning to school when the other kids returned to school.
Oh, okay.
So I stopped off at the school to pick up their learning package for the week. But again, that was like, I drive up, phone, someone comes out, hands me a plastic bag. I hand her a plastic bag with their homework from the previous week. Oh, yeah. we make the exchange. I get in my car. I hand sanitizer my hands and the outside of the plastic bag she hands me and drive home. And I haven't left my house since. And other than to go get the jab. That was the only other time I've left. But like, we don't need to leave the house as much as we are. We, the collective.
That's right. Yeah, the we. I do. I still work outside of my house, obviously. But now that I'm working down at my old job again, I'm exposed to far less than I was before.
Yeah.
Because I go to a place where I work on my alone all day, and I come home and I go to bed.
Yeah, and being around other people for work is a different thing. Like, don't get me wrong. I recognize my privilege in being able to work from home during this pandemic. 100%. That is a privilege I have. So for people who have to work outside the home, that is a different risk. But that's not on them. That's on.
There's no way that everybody that's out there right now is doing it because they have to work.
No, God, no.
The streets are full. Like, it's almost like there's no pandemic. So
yeah. And I like some of it's, you know, we've got the vaccination and, you know, after one shot, we're starting to feel a little bit more bulletproof again. And we're not like, it's 3 weeks after your second shot. I feel like, admittedly at this point, if I get it, I'll get lesser symptoms likely. But I can still pass it on to people who can't get vaccinated. People who choose not to is a different story. But it's the people who can't that I do still feel for.
I have not had my first jab yet. Every time I try to book, it's on days that the only availability is on days that I'm working.
No, drive through. Go drive through.
Okay.
100%. Actually, get the editing done quickly so our listeners can take this advice. Go to the drive-through. I went at the drive-through. I checked online. It said I was watching in the morning because I couldn't go till later in the morning. So 8 a.m., 2-hour wait, 9 a.m., 2-hour wait, 10 a.m., 3-hour wait, 11 a.m., back to a 2-hour wait. I'm like, okay, I went and I'm like, all right, have lunch with me. I made a big cup of tea. I have just mug for tea in my car, have this water bottle full of water. I brought my laptop with me so I can play some computer games and get caught up on work for you know, this wait. I phoned my partner on the way and it's like, yeah, it's a 2-hour wait. Now it's back to 2 hours. And they were like, no. If it says 2 hours, plan for 4. And like, oh, I have. I got laptop, phone, fully charged. Everything's good to go.
I'm on the board. Yeah.
I was out in under an hour.
Nice.
I pulled in at, I think it was 11. I remember looking at the clock because I wanted to time it. Pulled in 3 cars before I entered the actual building where the vaccination happens. They come out and they're like super apologetic. We're really sorry. We need to pause. It's only going to be a 20-minute wait. We didn't run out of anything. We need to stop the vaccinations for 20 minutes and then we'll start back up again. I'm like, okay. That was the only thing, because other than that, the line was never stopped moving. So I'm like, grab my laptop. I'm like, I could get caught up on work, but I'll play a little Civilization instead. Play some video games. And 20 minutes later, sure enough, got in, got out. They make you sit in a parking lot for 15 minutes after you get the jab.
To make sure
with big signs that say, if you have symptoms, if any of these things happen, hit the flashers, honk the horn, and a nurse will be out to you.
Okay.
Between when I entered the exhibition grounds and when I left the exhibition grounds, I believe was 1 hour and 5 minutes total. But
Wow.
I think I sat in the parking lot for about 20 to 25 minutes rather than only 15. And there was the 20-minute delay partway through. So had I been 3 cars sooner, and had I been like set a timer when they said wait in the parking lot for 15 minutes, I probably would have been about a half hour. So go to the drive-through.
Okay.
I think they ran out of vaccines recently, but as soon as they get the next shipment in, they'll reopen the drive-through. It is quick. It is easy. You in and out. Yeah. No, I was expecting 4 hours. Like I was prepped for a 4-hour wait, just in case, right? And
yeah, like because
no.
I'm doing I'm looking at the booking online and I couldn't find
there was
one.
None in Regina.
And then so which day can I go? Which day can I afford to not do deliveries so that I can take 4 hours to get my vaccination?
Yeah.
But if it's going to be a little quicker, then I'll go in here right away.
Yeah. And like I encourage people to go do the drive-through. It was super slick. I had, it's, there are a number of places, and I heard one or two, I don't say even horror stories, because it was always from people who were saying like, yeah, I'm super glad I waited, but it took me X number of hours, but not many. Like overwhelmingly, all of the social media posts I'm seeing are, it was like in and out super quick, way quicker than I was expecting. And that seems to be a universal experience for people.
That's good.
Go get the jab. We can all be free.
Yeah, that's right.